Technology has been such an important factor in the oil and gas sector, and it's really featured very prominently in much of our research as well as our interactions with a lot of the senior executives as well. The approach that we take is rather a holistic view, is that we try to understand and work with some of our colleagues within the company and understand what are the broad industry trends at play. What are some of the cost trends? What assets are we getting into and getting out of? What are some of the regulatory factors? And then we try to understand what role technology plays in both capturing some of the opportunities as well as addressing some of the challenges. And those responses are going to be, in some cases, be very tactical. It'll be, how do we improve recovery from a resource? How do we manage and lower costs? How do we ensure that we don't have any catastrophic incidents? But technology is also one of those areas that companies can truly strategically differentiate themselves. And you look at, how can they, in some cases, whether they improve performance, they improve their attractiveness as a partner, and they allow themselves to gain access to some of these resources that's so critical to their performance and their existence. That it's really, some of these issues, and that's why it's so important. That's why we feature it very prominently at IHS Energy CERAWeek. Not only do we bring together many of the technology executives, but it's also of such importance to the broader industry executives as well. It's really an exciting period of time for both technology and innovation in the oil and gas sector. And we see it a very dynamic period where companies are really changing their approach to both how they develop and how they use technology. In some areas, one of the ways is how they're sourcing technology. And what we see is that companies are kind of shifting away from just looking very internal and developing it within their research labs. And they're thinking about some of the partnerships that they might undertake, both whether those partnerships are with universities or in some cases with these industrial partnerships. And some very prominent ones have been developed recently. Another area is something we refer to as the globalization of innovation. It's something that we begin to see as that companies expand beyond their boundaries and beyond their borders, and they begin to look more globally, and whether they begin to do research close to those resources, close to the oil and gas resources, or in some cases, they look to identify those clusters where they can begin to work with other like-minded individuals. We've begun to see some of the other partnerships as well, but also companies are emerging, they're beginning to develop internal venture capital groups as well, and they're investing in early stage energy companies. So that's one, that's around how companies are beginning to source technology. Another is how they're applying it. And they're beginning to look at not only are they applying technologies in isolation, but they're beginning to develop these new operating models that leverage some of the capabilities. One of the key ones is as companies begin to have greater degrees of automation and communication technologies, they're beginning to shift where the work is done and shifting it from some of the field locations back to some of the office environments and beginning to think differently as well about how they work with some of their partners. And finally, it's just some of the individual technologies as well that are really beginning to push the boundaries of what the oil companies are doing. The whole role of big data and advanced analytics is playing a pretty major role within oil and gas. As we begin to see companies leveraging some of these capabilities to identify where they should be drilling their wells, to identify pieces of equipment that are about to fail, and to take steps before. Some of the subsea technologies are really critical as well as you begin to shift some of the roles and processes from the platforms to the seafloor. And finally, some of these enhanced oil recovery processes as well as companies begin to shift into carbonates and some other really challenging asset environments and how they are applying some of these enhanced oil recovery to increase recovery from their resources. We try to feature this prominently as well within IHS Energy CERAWeek, and the ways that we do this is that one is we bring together what we call our Energy Innovation Pioneers program, early stage energy technology companies that are either from inside the industry or outside the industry and really kind of showcase some of these technologies to many of the attendees. We also have a very prominent leadership circle program community of our energy executives, energy technology executives, which we have some pretty frank and open conversations about both what's working well and what's not working well, and what are some of the different directions that companies can begin to push to really begin to leverage and improve the use of technology and innovation more generally within the industry. The industry does best when it doesn't develop technology in a vacuum, and it recognizes the broader industry trends that are at play. And certainly what we begin to see a real shift over the last several months as with the oil price drop, companies are coming under greater pressure. And this is both happening within some of the corporate technology groups, but it's really being pushed by business unit needs. And in some cases, the technology development is actually happening in the business units as well. in really kind of developing some of these innovative solutions as well as practices that can begin to help companies both manage costs as well as improve efficiencies that allow them to compete in this low oil price environment. They're coming out that they're attacking this in several different ways. One of which is capital expenditures, and they're looking to change to change some of their approaches. Some is that both looking at how they can begin to standardize some of their CapEx and some of their facilities that they put into place. They're also looking at entirely new concepts. I mentioned the role that subsea technologies can play and how they begin to shift some of the processing and some of the activities from the platform to the seafloor. We also look at some of these extreme demanning, where they begin to take platforms and facilities that used to be manned by hundreds of people and shifting most of those individuals and really just having people come to the facility when it's needed. These can save tens and hundreds of millions of dollars over the lifetime of an asset. You're also looking at them from the drilling perspective. You look at how companies are approaching this and really beginning to take a manufacturing approach as they begin to automate, as they begin to use data, to use continuous improvement. They can really begin to treat this as a manufacturing process that allows them to continuously improve. And you begin to see some reductions in the role in the area of around 50 to 70% reduction in CapEx around drilling. And finally, around operating cost, the ongoing lifetime cost of producing a barrel of oil or a barrel of equivalent of gas. If you look at the major costs around labor, around consumables, around energy, companies are becoming more efficient. They're better leveraging their human capital, human resources, making them more efficient, improving the efficiency, the energy efficiency of their big pieces of equipment. And finally, optimizing and reducing their consumables. And we're seeing reductions on the order of 10 to 20%. So as you begin to add all these up, and these certainly aren't standard practices in the industry, but as you begin to add all of these up, you begin to see that companies are able to significantly reduce their costs, improve their efficiency, and really begin to be much more competitive against their peers in this much more challenging environment that we're beginning to see. And this is absolutely something that we're going to be focusing on at CERAWeek 2015, is that we'll begin to look at what's the role of technology, what can it play in a low oil price environment.